Hey guys, in this lesson, we're going to be introducing a concept that is related to computing, but is also super important for web development. And that's this idea of file paths, the absolute and relative paths, what they are and how they work. You can think of a file path as a unique location for a file or a folder on your computer. So similarly, if you wanted to tell somebody about a unique location in the world, then I tell you, well, go to this particular path. And what it would look like is I would tell you to zoom in on the UK and then go into London. And then inside London, I want you to go into Westminster. And then in Westminster, there's this place called Page Street, and there's a really nice cafe on it. And through this path, I've directed you to a unique location. Similarly, we can use a file path on a computer to direct the computer to look inside a specific location in the hard drive. If you're a normal computer user, you often don't even need to think about file paths because it's all done graphically. If you want to navigate to a particular file, then you could just go into your project folder, go into your images folder, and you find your cat image, and then you can open it up. But similarly, we could use this concept of paths to go to exactly the same location and navigate to the same files. A file path can direct someone to a file or a folder. As you can see here, we've got a very simple structure of the storage on a computer. The root is usually the starting point of your computer filing system, and this is usually called your hard drive. So this could be your C drive on a Windows, or it could be your Macintosh HD, which is on a Mac. If this is the organizational structure of your files, then you'd have a very clean computer, but also it'd be very simple for us to run through the example. I could direct the computer to this particular file, or I could direct them towards this particular folder. And I would do both of those things using a file path. We've seen what a file path looks like, and we can see what the destination can be. But if you remember at the beginning of the lesson, I told you there are two types of file paths. There are absolute file paths and relative file paths. So what's the difference? Well, an absolute file path is probably the simplest to understand. It's a file path that is relative to the root of the computer. Remember, that is the C drive or it is the Macintosh HD. And then we can use the file path to direct to a specific location, in this case, this cat PNG, using the absolute file path. And this is what it would look like on Windows, and this is what our file path would look like on a Mac. In both of these cases, we're traversing a journey effectively, and we're taking people from the very beginning, which is the root of the hard drive, and we're navigating them firstly into the project folder and then into the images folder. And then finally, we reach our final destination, which is the cat PNG. And that's effectively all that these two things describe, right? They are simply a path in order to get to our desired final destination. An absolute file path is really useful when you're navigating on a computer, because no matter where you are currently within the file structure, you could be currently in the project folder, you could be in the index.html, you can be at any part of the computer, you can always tell them this absolute file path, and the computer would know how to go from the very beginning into that destination that you specified. Now, however, for web development, a more useful type of file path is a relative file path. As the name suggests, it's relative to something, right? So what is it relative to? In this case, we are not in the root folder. We're writing our code, for example, inside the index.html, and we want to pull up an image on our website. So we have to specify the path. But in this case, we can specify it relative to the location where we are writing our code, this particular file. If you think of your starting point as this file, then relative to it, how do we get to this cat PNG? Well, we can first go into the images folder, and then inside the images folder, we direct to the cat.png. So usually relative file paths are a little bit shorter. And also, more importantly, it doesn't matter if you move your folders around, it's always going to be valid. For example, if this project folder got moved into a different folder, or if it became nested inside another folder, then this particular relative file path, this short journey, is still always going to be valid. In web development, when we're referring to a particular resource, say we want to bring up an image or sound or a movie or another HTML file for that matter, we usually will use a relative file path. Now, one of the things that's really helpful for us in writing relative file paths is there are these special characters that can make it easier for us to navigate the file structure. One such character is the 2 double dots. And when we write 2 double dots at the beginning of our relative file path, what it means is to go up a level. Basically, that's all it means. It just means go up a level and then go into whichever resource or whichever path you want to navigate. In this case, we are starting off in our index.html, and this file is located inside the project folder. So this is where our starting point is. If we go up a level using those 2 double dots, then what that enables us to do is to go into the root folder. Now, relative to this root folder, in order to navigate to the essay.docx, all we have to write is essay.docx. And this enables us to travel up through the folder tree. Another special character is the single dot. And what this single dot does is it tells us to stay within the current directory and look over there. So where is the current directory? Well, relative to our starting point here, the current directory is, of course, our project folder right here. Relative to this project folder, we can navigate using that / to start right here, and then we can go into the dog.png simply by using this more direct file path. Now, one thing you might see out there in the wild is in order to access something within the current directory means the folder that your file is directly located in. So in this case, again, it's the project folder. But whenever you want to access anything in the current directory, so anything along the same hierarchy here, so this one or this one or this one, you can also omit the /. So you can actually just simply write dog.png and it will look within the current project folder in order to find that. But sometimes using this direct method doesn't actually work. So I recommend whenever you're trying to access something within the current directory to go ahead and use this / notation. This way it's going to work 100% of the time. So now it's time to try an exercise and see if you've understood some of the important concepts that we covered in terms of file paths. Once you've downloaded and extracted the folder that we've set up for you, you should have it open in VS Code inside your web development projects folder. And here, if you expand the project folder, you will see many folders. There's folder 0, folder 1, folder 2, and folder 3. Now, if you go inside the index.html, you can see there is a very simple setup here where we've got a website that's going to display an image of all the animals. So that includes the rabbit, the cat, the dog, the fish, and the bird. Now, you'll notice that these image files exist within this unnecessarily complex folder structure. And the reason why it's unnecessarily complex is because I really want to make sure that you understand how file paths work. So I want you to look very, very carefully at how it's structured. And your goal is to write the image tags underneath the H2s so that we actually display the correct animals under each heading. If you take a look at the goal image, you'll see that the final project should look something like this. You've got all the animals, and then under each H2 heading, you've got the rabbit, the cat, the dog, the fish, and the bird being displayed. And these images come from these locations. I want you to use relative file paths in order to pull up the images as the source for your image elements. You already know how to create image elements from a previous lesson, so all you need to do is use what you've learned about file paths in this lesson to complete this challenge. And while you're working on it, remember to use the preview to see if your code is actually working. And if it doesn't display and it has this broken sort of look like this, then it means your file path is not correct and you should rethink what you've put in there. Pause the video now and give this challenge a go. Once you're done, come back and we'll go through the solution all together. But I want you to really give it a good go before you come back and try if you can solve your own problems, because they will inevitably come up. File paths are a very complex topic, so give it enough time. Really try to get the images showing. That is your challenge. Pause the video now. All right, so let's start off with rabbit. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I've got them in order of pretty much difficulty. The first one, the rabbit, should be the easiest to pull up because it's right inside the same directory, right? In fact, we can just use the // and we'll get to our rabbit PNG. Because remember what I said about the special character // it allows us to access anything that's within the same directory as where we are. Now here we can see that our index.html is located inside folder 0. So this is the parent folder for this file. Now the reason we know that is because when we collapse this folder, we can no longer see that file. Whereas if we collapse this folder 3, for example, we can still see index.html, but we can't see cat.png anymore. So it means this folder contains this file, and when we close it, then we no longer see it. In order to navigate up from the index.html, which is where we are currently located, because that's where we are writing our code, then we can use that // in order to navigate into the parent folder, which is folder 0. And then inside folder 0, then we can go into one of the contents in this folder, which is our rabbit.png. Now remember, with image elements, it's always good practice to add an alt text so that people who can't see the website know what this image is all about. So that's pretty simple. Now let's move on to the next one. Let's do the cat. Where is the cat relative to our current location? We are currently inside index.html. That's where we are writing our code right here, as you can see. In order to get hold of our cat.png, if we're starting from the index.html, then we can navigate up to our current parent folder using // and then once we're there, we can navigate into this folder 3 by simply adding folder 3 after the /. Then after that, we can go into the cat.png. So this is what our entire path would look like. Here, let's go ahead and do // and then you can see automatically VS Code is already recommending to you which options you have. We want to go into folder 3, and then inside folder 3, there's only one item, so we can only suggest one thing, and it's cat.png. One of my recommendations for working with file paths is when you're not getting the right recommendations when you start typing. For example, if I accidentally typed 2 dots instead of 1, then I'm getting dog, folder 0, folder 1, and I'm not getting folder 3 at all. I should already have alarm bells ringing in my mind. Something's not right here. It's not quite doing the right thing. So then I have to check my code and make sure that I'm actually using the correct special characters, which in this case is, of course, the /. And I recommend actually using the VS Code auto suggest, because then you're making less typing errors. Because even if you type it slightly wrong, let's say I add an extra T in here by accident, then our file path is going to break and we're not going to see our image at all. That's why I recommend using the drop down selection. In order to complete this, finally, let's add a alt text and then close off our self-closing image tag. So now we've got rabbit, cat. All we have left is dog, fish, and bird. So let's go ahead and add the source for dog. If you're looking at this and you're confused where exactly is dog located, then you can use that method I showed you previously by collapsing some of the folders in order to see it. So if we collapse all the folders, you can see that it's still visible. So it must be under the very, very parent folder 4.0 file paths. And this indeed is where it's located. So now we have to map a path from the file where we're writing our code, which is our index.html, and we have to go all the way to the dog. If we start here, we go up one level into the parent folder, and then we go up one more level into 4.0 file paths. Then from here, we can navigate to our dog.png. Let's translate that file path into actual text. First, we use the .. to go up a level, and this means that we get into the file paths. Remember, the .. gets us into our parent directory, so in this case it'll be folder 0, and the .. takes us up a level so we can actually get into this 4.0 file paths. If you take a look here, you can see it shows now our dog.png as an option, and if we hit enter, you can see our dog show up. Let's add our alt text, and then let's go to the next one, which is our fish. And our fish is located inside folder 1, as you can see right here. We can follow a similar path to how we got to dog by using the .. to go into the 4.0 file paths parent directory. From here, we can go into folder 1, and inside folder 1 is fish.png. And let's add our alt text, which is fish. And finally, let's do our bird. Bird is just one level further from fish. So we can actually, in fact, copy much of the file path of fish and then simply extend it. So it's inside folder 1, and inside folder 1 there's a folder 2, and inside folder 2 there's our bird.png. And there you have it. That's all the code we need in order to show up all of our animals. And as I mentioned, in web development, in most of the cases, you will be using these relative paths and not the absolute file paths. And when you're navigating around the folders, these special characters, the .. and the .. is very important in order to navigate to the correct location. And it's important that you understand from this exercise what is the difference between the .. and the .. And hopefully, if you manage to get all the images show up, then you know exactly what you're doing and you've learned the important parts of this lesson. Now, in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to use these file paths in order to get hold of different HTML files, and we can start building out a multi-page website. So for all of that and more, I'll see you there.